Hey everybody, welcome back to Part-Time Tabletopper. My name is Adam and I have a very cool modular build here for you. Now, specifically the build, because there's a lot going on, is the actual gate and the fence that you're seeing here. The motivation for this was that I had seen so many cool projects on Instagram and Facebook groups of just all these awesome graveyards people had made, and I always wanted to make one for myself, but I talked myself out of it constantly. So I finally buckled down and said, no, not even anywhere close to Halloween, but I'm going to do a graveyard build anyways, and this is what I came up with. I'm super happy with the results. It's modular, meaning that these posts and the wall pieces, as well as the gate, all completely come apart because I wanted this to be as versatile as it possibly could be. And specifically, it actually doubles. All of these gate posts can make great dungeon pillars as well, so it's a twofer with this. So let's get into this build and I'll show you exactly how I made it. First, we're going to start with some 1-inch thick strips of XPS foam we're going to cut to varying sizes. We also are going to need a pen, a hobby knife, as well as a straight edge. We're also going to need a hot glue gun, as well as something to poke a hole into the foam with. I'm using this clay sculpting tool. I'm using cocktail picks as the bars for the fence. You can pick these up on Amazon, but use anything that you like the design of. Finally, we're also going to need some heavy hex nuts to weigh everything down. So I cut the XPS foam into 4-inch long strips. The widths all vary by about 1/4 of an inch. So you have 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then at the very top, 1/2 inch. The two at the bottom are 1/2 inch tall, and the top one is 1/4 inch tall. We're going to glue all of these together into sort of a pyramid design. Now, using that pen and that hobby knife, we're going to start creating a brick or a stone design on this wall. I'm drawing and carving it in, and you'll see the technique here, but it's very straightforward. We start off by using the hobby knife to carve the initial pattern, and then we're going to run over that with the pen just to really deepen those recesses and curve the edges. Then once it's all done, we're going to take a foil ball and just roll that over the edges to roughen everything up and give it that stone texture. So now we're going to poke the holes into that XPS foam. I showed you a clay sculpting tool, but this is just me also giving you some variation showing there is no right or wrong way to do it, as long as these cocktail skewers can fit into them. Now, you could use the hot glue or some PVA, but I chose at the last second to use some super glue to install these cocktail picks. Now, if your cocktail picks are long enough, you probably don't need to use these, but I'm using a skewer or a dowel here and cutting it 4 inches across just to use as the horizontal bar on these fences. Using that same brick pattern and some 3-inch tall 1x1 XPS foam pillars, I'm going to create pillars for this wall. Now we're going to go into the bottom of every fence piece and pillar piece and install some hex nuts with some hot glue to ensure that they are weighed down and they're harder to tip over. One thing I wanted to note is that the reason that I have the pillars and the wall pieces for this gate separated is because I want to be able to use those pillars in multiple ways. So when they're not in this gate, they could also make good dungeon pillars or something along those lines. The more versatility, the better. So, first things first, because I like to have a nice dark undercoat and I also want it to be hard and sealed, I'm going to use some black paint and some Mod Podge. Then, after that base coat is on, we're going to use some pewter gray as well as some other varying colors to create the brick and the stone colors. I'm also going to use some foam-safe black spray paint to try and fill in some of those crevices and speed the job up for me a little bit. These are going to paint those cocktail skewers and the dowels as well. This is an additional step that you don't necessarily have to do, though. Now we're going to use that pewter gray to create a nice solid gray undertone, and then we're going to paint some individual bricks with some of those other varying colors. So I got this far in the build and was like, oh yeah, I forgot I need to make a gate. So I'm going to start off by using these pillar jigs from Shifting Lands to create some pillars that I'm going to cut in half and use to create some decorative stone for the gate. All of this is going to be carved with XPS foam. I made some 4-inch tall pillars because I want the gate to be a bit taller than the rest of the fence. And now I'm just going to glue those half-cut pillars onto the back and the front of these to create a cool stone design. I decided I wanted the pillars on this gate and all the rest of the fence to have an extra layer on top just to add some depth. So you're going to see me add these little squares onto the top of all of them. Now, truthfully, I just kind of made this gate up as I went. I think it turned out pretty good, but you don't have to necessarily know the exact cuts I'm making here. Just know that I'm cutting foam out to a little bit of a thinner strip, attaching it to the inside, and then I'm going to use that archway jig you see down there to trace out some foam arches and put those as the structure of the gate. Now, because of how thin that archway is and how heavy the two pillars are, I realized that this gate was very flimsy and was going to easily break. So I carved off just a tiny bit of the bottom of that archway, and I'm going to put this across just to add some extra support. Now I'm going to use some dowels as well as those cocktail skewers to create the actual door of the gate. And here's what it looks like painted. Now to start blending all of that stone together, we're going to use a few steps here. The first is going to be dry brushing with like a khaki or a camel or sand color, then a light gray, and then a white. Now just to blend it all together and darken it up again, we're going to use a homemade black wash and a homemade brown wash. I'm going to cover everything with the black wash, and then while that wash is still wet, I'm just going to dab a couple pieces of the brown wash to add some variation. At this point, you could consider yourself done, but I'm going to do a lot of finishing touches. The first is going back and dry brushing one more time with that light gray, as well as the white for some edge highlighting. I'm also going to use some Nuln Oil to darken the recesses, and then I'm going to use a black metallic color and that rust to paint the iron bars. So here I am going back over one more time with that gray dry brush, and I think this last one just really blends the stones together and makes it look cohesive. Now let's use that black metallic paint to paint all of the bars. While that's drying, I'm going to take some Nuln Oil and just go into all of the cracks and recesses of this build. The idea here is to really just take an extra step to darken those crevices. Then we're going to go back and highlight all of the edges with a white. Those two steps are really going to make these pieces pop. Now that the metallic paint is dry and the Nuln Oil is drying, I'm going to go back over with this rust wash and just make all of the iron bars look a little bit worn and rusted. I'll say it goes on very orange and rusty, but once it dries, it has a great look. Finally, here I am doing some edge highlighting with that white. I'm just taking a brush and running the side of that brush over every edge so that only the corners and the highest points are bright white. This is going to make the piece pop, and you'll see in just a moment. I also had these little 3D printed birds from a previous project lying around, so I decided to prime them and dry brush them to make them look like stone and make them decorate the gate. Here is what it looks like all finished. And it really is that simple. With just a little bit of time, some basic crafting, and some basic painting, you can have an awesome modular gate and graveyard set just like this. Now, I say graveyard, but I kept mine very neutral because I wanted to be able to swap out the graveyard set and maybe put in like a church or some old ruins or like a nice estate, right? Anything that this kind of a wall and a gate being around would add depth to and not stand out and look weird. But if you wanted yours to be just for a graveyard, like go ahead and add skulls and angels and things like that that you think would look really cool, you know, gargoyles. One final thing I just wanted to note is that this graveyard set that I have here, I did not craft. I bought it online because I don't have a 3D printer myself, but I found it for like 20 bucks on Amazon. Just Google graveyard sets and there's a lot of cool options out there if you guys don't want to craft it yourself. With that being said, if you liked the crafting project, please like the video because it helps other people find it. And then if you guys want to see future projects that I do, please subscribe because I'd love to have you as part of the community. If this is the first video that you've ever seen, go check out my channel. I've got a couple other tutorials on there. I try to put one out every like 1 or 2 months depending on what inspiration comes, I guess, and how busy I am. So happy crafting in the meantime, guys. Happy gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye.